Welcome to the Writer's Dream. Our show is a show for authors to talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on our Facebook page, which is called The Writer's Dream. And if you have a question for us or you would like to be on the show, please visit my website. It's just my name, lindamariafrank.com, and there is a tab to press where you can find out how to get on the show. Our guest today is Brian McLaughlin, and he has written a wonderful book about his personal experience. It's called A Flight Without Wings. Welcome, Brian. It's
Hi,
good
Linda.
to see you.
Good to see you again.
Now, tell us a little bit about your background, because I think it really feeds into the book.
Well, I'm an average, typical guy from Long Island. Spent most of my life here. Married a high school friend. We travel throughout the world extensively, and we seem to come back here to Long Island, close to the ocean, which is
Well, this is
like
the center of the
inspiration.
universe. Come on, Brian.
Well, that's what we think. And I think it's shared by a lot of people who have been here, who have spent their time here. So we keep coming back, and
So, on one of your trips, was it one of your trips?
yeah, on one of my trips is when I had an accident.
Knowing about you, you're interested in fishing. Was it a fishing trip?
No, it wasn't a fishing trip, but my wife's family has a house on the beach in Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And she also worked for the airlines, which afforded us access to the world. So we spent a lot of time in Mexico, a lot of time. And this was, the accident that I had was just a typical day, a typical visit, vacation, if you will. And it was very typical. There wasn't anything special about it.
But what was the accident?
Well, I don't know, blacked out, passed out, whatever, and fell down half a flight of stairs and landed my face on a concrete planter that was, raised planter around a tree. Mm-hmm. And severe head trauma. Wow. Multiple skull fractures, all dislocated fractures all over my face. So it's described in the book fairly well, maybe too well. I don't know.
Did they ever find out what caused you to black out?
No.
Wow.
No. We have theories. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that I was over drinking or anything like that. Well, we have some theories, but still no proof. Mm-hmm. So we keep our theories to ourselves unless we can prove it. So it's just one of those things.
So they took you to the hospital?
Took me to the hospital. Oddly enough, they didn't have, it's not like here in the States where you dial 911 and an ambulance comes from wherever you are. Mm-hmm. The waiter that was serving us at the table left and ran a dozen blocks in town to get the ambulance to come back.
Oh my gosh.
To take us to, actually into Cancun. We were in Playa del Carmen, which is about 40 minutes or so away.
So you were
brought to the hospital there, and
in Cancun.
In Cancun, and oddly enough, there was an ophthalmologist on duty in that hospital that night, and he worked on putting my eye back together.
Wow. But you were unconscious.
It was just the beginning of the surgeries that I would need ultimately. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the equipment to properly diagnose the extent of the injuries, but they guessed at it and felt that I should be airlifted to the States, mm-hmm. and that's what happened. So
you were unconscious this whole time?
I was unconscious most of the time. I didn't wake up until after surgery.
In the States?
I came in, in Mexico. I was brought in comatose. And I remember waking up after my experience that I write about in the book.
Still
after
in Mexico?
Seeing my father, who had passed years earlier, he sent me back. He said, "You have to go back." And I was very disappointed.
Yes.
I was
So,
very disappointed.
but I want you to take us step by step through what you experienced while you were comatose.
Well,
We use the term
I'm
comatose.
assuming that that's when I had my, what I call near-death experience. I used to call it a death experience. I knew nothing about them until my own. I describe it in the book as typical of many stories that you hear, where I was aware of the doctors and nurses around me, could hear them, could have quoted them, but I couldn't speak. I just couldn't speak. And that was a little bit disturbing. And I kept thinking to myself, listen, I can hear you, but I couldn't get it out. Then I sort of seemed to drift off to some place where other people compare it to the, bright light or the tunnel, it's similar to that. And where I ultimately met up with my deceased father. And he was the one who sent me back. He looked very different than he looked the last time I had seen him. He died of cancer, so he was just a shell of a guy that he was. But when I saw him there, vibrant, happy, pain-free, and he didn't react to the way I looked either, which I didn't know at the time was quite a mess. So that was satisfying. But the fact that he sent me back was disappointing.
What did he say to you?
Those words, you have to go back. And which is, there was a lot of feelings involved, a lot of feelings that you feel, and not necessarily spoken, though he did speak those words to me. When he did, he turned from me to leave, and I turned from him to leave. And at that moment is when I opened my eyes in the hospital.
In the operating, yeah.
So very powerful, very profound.
Now I'm going to ask you a silly question. Did this change your life?
Oh my God. Yeah, I would say, although I never had a sense of time when I was there. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes, no sense of time. So it's hard for me to determine.
How long?
Unless I were to go and check and see how long was I comatose, and maybe try to determine that way.
But you lost when you hit that planter, you lost consciousness.
So I was gone, believe me. The extent of I won't get into the extent of the injuries here, but they're described fairly completely in the book, listed out. I have documentation for all of it. I had access to OR reports and things like that because of family members that are doctors and so forth. So I'm fairly comfortable knowing why I was there, not that it was anesthesia-induced or opiate-induced. So I'm comfortable with that.
Now, when you were airlifted to the States, what hospital did you go to then?
I wound up at Good Samaritan Hospital in West Islip.
Okay.
As I said, my twin brother's a doctor, my uncle's a doctor, another cousin doctor. They were able to put together a team that I needed to rebuild my face.
And how many operations?
They did it in one.
All right. That's
it was
good.
extensive. The work that they did was extensive for one surgery. It was 6 hours or so, 6 or 7 hours of surgery. And they were able to put that team together and what I call in the book, fix me. And
Now, did you have a further experience when you had that surgery?
no.
Okay, it was just that one.
That was just real painful and
Yeah.
Get me out of the hospital type thing.
Yeah.
Just a typical injury.
So, what inspired you? Why did you write the book? And tell us about the title, "A Flight Without Wings." Why that title?
Well, after much thought, the title "Flight Without Wings" was had a double meaning. The flight without wings, obviously, it indicates a trip someplace without benefit of, wings or engines or, but for me, it was a throwback to my preconceived notions of what heaven would appear to be. And after having experienced it, or what I believe it was, for my own belief, that's what I believe I was. I didn't see those things. I didn't get that vision that I had in my head. I didn't get that while I was there. I didn't see any wings. I didn't see any halos.
No angels.
My father, no angels, no unicorns, no, none of those preconceived
Saint
notions
Peter
that I
wasn't
had.
there.
I didn't see St. Peter. I didn't even see the pearly gates. And I don't know, and I'm not professing to know whether I was, online, to get in, or whatever. And, Linda, I'm not even, indicating that it's everyone else's conception of heaven either. Maybe it's a state of mind. Maybe our consciousness exists afterwards. I don't know. Maybe it has a zip code. I really don't know, and I'm
Yeah.
not professing to know. All I'm saying is, in my book, is that this is what I saw, this is what I felt. What it really is, or whatever, is debatable.
So, what is your message in the book? What in relating this experience, what are you trying to tell people?
I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to tell people is the same big thing that the experience was for me. And that is that the experience itself was not the whole story. The biggest part of the story for me came afterwards, and is still coming.
Okay.
In other words, I experienced certain things. They changed my life. They changed my outlook. They changed the way I relate to other people, the way I accept it, how I would recognize opportunity, a lot of different things. And a lot of things have happened in the 20 years since this happened to me that I feel is proof of that. Someone may argue that, but...
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I'll give you an example that's in the book. And the lack of fear from the peace that I got, the feeling of peace that I got, also eliminated the fear of death. Okay? Which also eliminated my fear of a lot of things. So I was able to approach things, still able to approach things from a little different perspective than I did before, without fear. So I had a business, it happened to be commercial painting, one of the businesses, and one of my clients indicated how much money he spent on signage and so forth and so on. I'll make this very quick. I said, well, I could do that. Not a problem. So I just went to the guy that was the representative of the company that I dealt with, and I said, listen, anytime you want to save yourself 15% on your bottom line, let me know. I'll do them for you. Oh, you do that? Oh, of course. Hadn't a clue. I didn't have a clue how to do them. Not a clue. And this is honest to God. So that lack of fear allowed me to open that door of opportunity. And believe me, it's been hugely successful. And it was really just a matter of, ultimately recognizing an opportunity that presented itself and then letting it in.
Well, we were talking before the show about the fear factor.
Right.
And we were really discussing the whole concept of how many people poo-poo these out-of-body, near-death experiences, whatever, as some phenomenon of brain trauma. And some people are adamantly opposed to even accepting this. Some people are open to it. Some people embrace it. And what I found, because I'm getting on in years now, I talk to people a lot, is that fear stands in the way of a lot of joy.
Certainly does.
and a lot of being able to embrace what is out there in life. And I'm glad you said the thing that inspires me most is that you lost your fear of death. And I'm hearing this message from so many different places about, you know, death is like a transition. There's something after this. There's another life out there. There's a whole nother existence. And my background is science. And my background in science, I love to read about what the astrophysicists are doing now. Not that I understand half of it, but there's this thing called string theory, which indicates that there are a whole lot more dimensions than we ever thought about.
Right.
And so what's happening is science is becoming more in tune with all of these experiences people are saying. And don't you find that if so many people are talking about this, it just can't be like some random thing?
Yeah, I do. You have a background in forensics or something, don't you?
Yeah. I taught forensic science.
Yeah, you know, very hard to prove something like this that happened to me, you know, metaphysically or some quantum physics. It's very hard to offer proof for that. But I feel that, you know, science and religion or spirituality coexist.
Me too.
And I happen to think, my own opinion is that they overlap in many places. And that gray area that's formed from their overlap is where most of us define our belief systems. So, you know, I've had doctors, even ones that tried to put me back together, stand there and were unable to explain to me why I was still alive. The neurosurgeon could not explain to me, looking at my MRI and looking at me standing in front of him, was at a loss to explain how I could still be alive.
Because your brain damage was so extensive?
Well, no brain involvement, but the breakage of bones, a blowout fracture of the eye orbit, which shattered bones throughout. Normally, or under other conditions, maybe, that would have pierced the brain, caused involvement, a brain bleed, hemorrhage.
Yeah.
So he could not explain it medically anyway. So for me, it was a good validation because, and you know, we all accept that. We all say, okay, we're willing to accept the fact that he can't explain it. He said sometimes tissue responds, sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes miracles happen.
And sometimes people call it a medical miracle. And we seem to accept that. It's an unexplained event. So
Well, if it happens,
hopefully other unexplained events will be have more powerful messages for people going forward.
have you like talked to anybody else who's had these kinds of experiences?
One other, but very briefly. It was just almost a mention in passing. I just never really wanted to put any thoughts into my head from someone else's experience that may color.
That might change what you...
Might change it. You know, someplace someone that got, you know, filed in the back of my mind someplace and came out not as being 100% my recollection of it or my experience with it. And I was adamant about it being strictly my words. I mean, these 20,000 words in this book is a very short book. I mean, I could show you the manuscript, the original manuscript that I typed out, and it very close to the same 20,000 words that are here in the book. So as I recalled it, I wrote it down, and that's how it's presented.
But since it's been...
Uninterpreted.
But since it's been published, I mean, now that you've gotten your story out the way you wanted to, have you have other people sought you out?
A few have asked. A few have taken the time to write reviews, as you may have seen a few. But I don't know, many people seem to retreat. Right? And I kept this story to myself for 21 years. It's a long time.
That is a long time.
And up until the time that I spoke to the neuropsychologist who is quoted on the front of the book, I would have kept it to myself for another 21 years, quite honestly. He indicated that people would be happy to hear the story, to learn, to, get something out of it. So he kind of convinced me to write the book, and that's why I gave him credit for that on the front of the book, having done that.
And has writing the book, the process of writing the book, changed your perspective of this experience?
No, it hasn't changed my perspective of the experience. It has changed my perspective of the process.
The process of writing? We're both laughing.
When I first approached this whole thought, I thought, number one, who would want to hear about my life? Well, that's what I went through. Who would be interested in hearing about, and after that, I thought, sitting down and writing enough words for a book, that's going to be tough.
Daunting.
Well, I actually sat down on 9/11, which was the anniversary of my accident. It happened on 9/11/94. And on that day, on that anniversary, I sat down and wrote half this book in one sitting. It just all came flowing out of me.
Before we get into the whole thing about writing, publishing, and marketing, let me read a review. Okay? A fascinating read that is both inspired and inspiring. A Flight Without Wings, My Experience with Heaven, will prove to be an enduringly valued addition to personal and community library metaphysical studies reference collections and supplemental studies reading lists. It should be noted that A Flight Without Wings, My Experience with Heaven is also available, obviously.
I know what review that is. Is that the Midwest Book Review? That came from the Midwest Book Review.
It probably says it here somewhere, but
fairly well known.
But I mean, the fact that it's being included where people study these phenomenon, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I guess you would say I'm impressed with that. Also very satisfying.
Yeah.
That the different avenues have been able to gather something from it. Those people that study, metaphysical studies, and some people who study religion or spirituality, all the different avenues seem to be getting something out of it. Well, it's very satisfying to me.
Well, the only personal experience I have with this, and it's not me, my first husband was in a terrible automobile accident, head-on collision. He was in a Volkswagen, the other person was in a 1960 Chevy. Okay, so not a fair fight. And he said, I could see the accident from above. I saw myself in the car, I saw my leg trapped in the car, and then I was on the ground. So that's the same kind of thing. Yeah, it's
not
just
uncommon.
Yeah.
You hear that oftentimes with anyone who experiences something like this, is some separation of their soul, if you will, from the body, and looking at it from a different angle, different perspective.
I have a weird sense of humor, and I keep thinking of the fact that, well, if you get hit hard enough, your soul would be knocked out of your body, and then what do you do? So come back here. So you self-publish?
Well, it was somewhere in between self-publishing and traditional publishing.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's not self-published as such, but it's a print-on-demand. So, although you wind up paying fees for certain organizations, certain artwork and composition and so forth, you're not having to pay a traditional publisher to print thousands and thousands of books or to commit to that. I mean, obviously, you still pay a fee for whatever you have done in writing.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
there's a fee for everything. But you don't have to, as I said, you don't have to find someone who's willing to put the money up for thousands of copies to be printed.
Right.
And I don't know, possibly sit someplace until the book is marketed or so
Right.
forth, enough to use up those copies. So
No.
these are printed on demand.
Right. Now, do you have a Facebook page?
I have a Facebook page under my name, Brian McLaughlin.
Right. And you have a
on
website.
Twitter, I'm on at BAM Playa.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a website that has all of that information on it.
Okay.
One can find places to purchase the book, or information about me, or even a snippet of the book itself to read, and they can take it from there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the best
The
we can
easiest
do,
way.
right?
It's the easiest
So,
way.
because you had this incredible experience and you wrote about it, what would you say to what's your best advice to a writer? Because you obviously were not a writer, neither was I
No.
when I started. And what would you tell a writer to
Not
help
only
them
if
on the journey?
Well, I would first suggest that they do the same thing I did, and that is to gather whatever information they can. And there's plenty available on the internet. Talk to other writers. I went and saw you at a writers group, gathered information, and used it going forward. You know, you put it all together and you use it. I think you find that if you do your homework, you do due diligence with the information, you can find people willing to help at a reasonable price and not take advantage of you or of your naivete. And you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. Just persevere.
Perseverance. That's what everyone says. Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story, and I wish you the best
Thank
of
you.
luck getting it out. And I know that you're going to meet some very interesting people in the
Yes.
future. Thanks,
Very good.
Brian.
Thanks, Linda. Great to
was
see
great.
you again.